Hello and welcome to this episode of the DigiPod. My name is Farieha Aziz. Today I am joined by David Sullivan. David is an executive director of the Digital Trust and Safety Partnership. David, thank you for making time for DawnNews English. Before we launch into discussion of what's happening in the tech accountability space and user safety, can you tell our audience what is the Digital Trust and Safety Partnership?
Certainly, and it's a pleasure to be with you, Faria. So the Digital Trust and Safety Partnership is an industry consortium that brings together companies who are providing all different kinds of digital products and services. And those companies are coming together to create best practices and international standards for trust and safety, which is this industry term for basically whatever content or conduct a given company might not want occurring on its platform. And the idea here is really rather simple, is that instead of trying to standardize what type of content or behavior should be allowable online, instead, let's recognize that all of these products and services are different, whether it's social media, messaging, search engines, dating, video games, AI, chatbots, what have you. So instead of standardizing the content, we should be standardizing the practices that companies use to address those kinds of challenges. And that's what we've been doing at the Digital Trust and Safety Partnership.
A lot of the conversation these days obviously is about the harms. And earlier it used to be just online harms, social media platforms. So with the advent of AI, that's taken a whole different dimension. And there's a lot of conversation around safety in design. Could you speak a little bit more about how does the Digital Trust and Safety Partnership envision sort of incorporating that?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the key aspects of our framework. All the companies who participate in the Digital Trust and Safety Partnership, or DTSP, commit to five overarching commitments. And this is kind of where I think the core of what having safe online products looks like. And so the first of those commitments is around safety in product development and making sure that companies have practices in place to ensure that they are considering safety from the very beginning of that product development life cycle. That's really how we think about it. We have a number of different practices that we've identified in our framework that are ways that companies can incorporate safety into product development, whether that is sort of abuse pattern analysis and sort of gathering data to think about what good products should look like, making sure that safety teams are involved in the product development process, that they're using things like risk assessments, and that they are incorporating the viewpoints of users of these products, not just during development before they're launched, but also in light of how they get used and what happens after the case. So there are a lot of different ways that companies can incorporate this, and the idea of safety by design, I think, is a concept that is taking hold in the industry and also throughout all of the different groups of stakeholders who are thinking about online safety. And it's one that we put front and center in our framework.
And how is sort of compliance or adherence to such standards assessed
Yeah.
by, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Our effort, which is a voluntary industry effort, incorporates really two things. We have the framework of best practices that I just mentioned, and so in addition to product development, we also have commitments around governance. What are the rules, the acceptable use policy, terms of service, community guidelines, whatever you call them, enforcement of those rules, improvement over time, and transparency. And we have practices that relate to all of those commitments. And then we've developed a methodology for assessing the maturity of the practices that our companies are using as part of their trust and safety operations. And that is a framework that can be used internally as a sort of self-assessment, or could potentially be used by a third party sort of independent assessor. But the way that we've approached building out these best practices and assessments and standardizing them and turning them into an international standard has been to not focus on the compliance side of the house, but instead to focus on aligning on concepts and frameworks and ideas. I think that even when you talk about a term within the industry like trust and safety, that is a term that may not be well understood by people outside of the industry, including by the users of these services in many, many different countries around the world. Um, but the ideas that it deals with around making sure that products are safe and trustworthy, that we're dealing with all of the kind of challenging issues, whether it's around children and child safety, whether it's around terrorist and violent extremist content, all of the different issues that people are really concerned with every single day are what we're working on here. And so we want to really produce a common framework that everyone can understand as the basis for dialogue, as the basis for self-regulation, as the basis for regulation by governments around the world. And that's what I'm really pleased to be reporting is that this framework that we developed about 4 years ago has now become a international standard from ISO and IEC. It's called ISO IEC 25389, and it's available on the ISO website.
I was just going to ask what has been the receptivity towards this
Yeah.
framework
Yeah.
and adoption of it, and also the cross-sectoral conversation among the many stakeholders, because obviously there's the user end of it, and then the companies and a lot of other actors in between.
Yeah. So our approach, which I think is a little bit different from the approach of many other actors, whether it is governments, civil society, academic experts, investors, our approach has been to start with the practitioners, start with the teams inside the companies providing these platforms. And instead of asking a normative question about how this should be done, we start with a descriptive question of how does trust and safety work? What are the practices that companies are using? And from that, what can we agree as an industry body is best practice. So that's been our point of departure, which I think is a little bit different from others in the space. That descriptive practice approach, I think, aligns with other frameworks like international human rights frameworks, for example. So these things are not in conflict with one another. But we wanted to start and say, one, are companies who are providing all different types of services using similar practices? And the answer to that is yes. All of them are using some combination of people and processes and technology in order to, kind of create the rules for a given digital product, enforce those rules, and try to keep their products safe. So we're coming at this from an industry perspective, but we've also been trying to engage very widely with all of the other constituencies who have a stake in this, which is really everyone around the world because everyone uses these products and services. But so whether that is engaging with regulators in different countries, with civil society organizations, human rights groups, journalists, we want to have those conversations and share the work we've done and get feedback so that we can improve on it in the future.
How has the response been, especially from regulators? Because, of course, right now, even among civil society, there is this debate that whether self-regulation is actually sustainable, given the kinds of harms that we're seeing on the rise exponentially, and how platforms or companies are responding to these.
Yeah, absolutely. So one, I would say, is that in different places around the world are in different places when it comes to regulation. And so, and you know this, and your audience knows this as well as anyone in terms of the regulation in Pakistan and the challenges that makes, especially for human rights. Um, Our framework is really, I think, something that can interface with regulations, can be used as a way for companies not to comply with everything that is required in every jurisdiction around the world, but providing a common global baseline. And then you can build on top of that as required by others. And I should say right now that DTSP, we are not a lobbying organization. So we're not out there telling governments what kinds of laws they should pass or not pass when it comes to online safety. But we do want to be a forum for industry expertise that can help regulators, understand what the industry sees as good practice and help try to make both regulations and how companies comply with those regulations as effective as possible, both for safety and for human rights.
And how is the civil society perspective factored in or taken back to some of the companies to incorporate in terms of, because I mean, there are issues every single day. We read a lot of reports on what is happening. What kind of conversation is there about that?
So a lot of what we do is try to provide a forum for those kinds of conversations. So whether it is at global conferences like the Internet Governance Forum or RightsCon, providing a space for those kinds of conversations, sharing the work we've done, getting feedback from civil society to improve it. Another example of that is 2 years ago, DTSP published a glossary of trust and safety terminology. Again, with the idea here of really trying to make sure that we all are using words and understanding what the definitions of those words are and not talking past each other. And as part of that glossary, we first did a global consultation and we received input on that from civil society organizations, from academics, and from regulators. And we also did a similar consultation several years ago now when we were developing the framework. So we've been able to, I think, take some of the input from civil society and reflect that in the different documents and publications and best practices that we've been developing. Going forward, we want to do more of that, not less. We're looking and thinking about how can we formalize opportunities for that kind of stakeholder engagement, especially as we continue this practice of taking best practices and proposing them to become international standards.
Now, there are a lot of areas, when you really get into digital trust and safety, some of which we see reflected in the Stanford conference. Is that something you can also talk to us a little bit about in terms of, in nuanced discussion? What are the different sort of areas that are covered and are topics of conversation at the moment?
Absolutely. So the Stanford Trust and Safety Research Conference is happening for the fourth year this year. And so that really is a conference that brings together researchers, whether it is from academia, from inside companies, and also from governments and civil society to share sort of what are the current, kind of topics of greatest concern. Where is the latest research at on all sorts of issues from very specific, kind of challenges around specific types of harmful content and behavior to things like how open source technology can help to raise the bar and help all types of organizations better deliver on trust and safety. So this conference that's happening at Stanford is, I think, one example among many of how this field of trust and safety has developed over the last 4 or 5 years. So you have organizations like DTSP, which bring together companies that are working in this space. You have organizations like the Trust and Safety Professional Association, which brings together the individual professionals who are working in this field to have opportunities for professional development and find community. And you have academics who are focusing very much on this. So in conjunction with the Trust and Safety Research Conference, Stanford also publishes a journal of online trust and safety, which has some of the latest research, both peer-reviewed research as well as commentary about different issues in the space. So one thing at the DTSP, when we published our glossary of trust and safety terms that I mentioned earlier, we published an article about how and why we developed that glossary for publication in that journal. And the great thing about, I think, all of this is that despite all of the challenges, despite all of the ways that the issues that trust and safety is attempting to deal with become politicized, contested, that you have the practitioners, whether they're inside companies or outside of companies, they may have very different views about what to do about a given issue. But there are venues and opportunities where those folks can come together and really dive into the weeds and talk about the specifics and do so in an evidence-based way. Much of this, I think, has happened too much in the United States, in Europe. There is really, I think, an important need for greater participation in these discussions from the majority world. That Journal of Online Trust and Safety that I just mentioned is currently preparing a special issue that is looking specifically at issues in the majority world. So I'm looking forward to seeing what research comes from that. But there is, I think, already important strides. 2 points maybe here is just the first, when you look at the agendas for this Stanford conference over the last 4 years, while it still consists of a lot of people who are based in California, there's increasing global participation as presenters and participants in that conference. The second thing maybe is just to say that the role of AI is also becoming much more predominant, and you can see that in the agenda and see that in the way people talk about trust and safety. AI is both, of course, a risk. We see all the challenges that we're seeing these days around how products like chatbots can pose a safety risk. But AI is also a key tool in the toolbox for companies doing trust and safety, whether that is detecting content that may be violative of their policies, reviewing that, and enforcing against it. And we've actually developed best practices for the use of AI in trust and safety as part of that effort.
What are some of the standards for safety around AI? And I believe you've written something recently as well on this, especially the chatbots, because that's been a topic of conversation, especially with the Reuters investigation, but a lot of others, whether it's self-harm or conversations that minors are having, et cetera, and the access, because these are now just integrated into the existing products that everybody is using.
Yes. So I recently wrote something for the World Economic Forum about this, where I said that we really need to make product safety, I think, the focus when it comes to dealing with these challenges around AI products like chatbots and other generative AI technology. There are a lot of different points of view and a lot of different areas of practice when it comes to AI. There are AI safety advocates who are very much focused on these long-term existential threats to humanity from AI. You have responsible AI teams inside companies who are like thinking about how to build AI products ethically. And there are trust and safety teams that are looking at how these things are actually playing out with the products that are in the market. And I think there is a need for less siloed conversations and more sharing of knowledge and expertise that really focuses on the users of these products and where they meet the products. And as you said, oftentimes it's not some completely new product that people are going to. It's finding the generative AI features inside, the social media messaging and other apps that everyone already uses on a daily basis. So I do think that using a product safety lens is the right way forward there. I also think this is a case in point of why we need to be thoughtful and careful in how we approach regulation and how we can think about using standards to support um, not just regulation, but to support that sort of safety by design approach. Um, you know, 2 years ago, no one was talking about the challenges with chatbots, and many laws and regulations were written to be about user-to-user services and platforms where people share information and share content. And a chatbot that someone is using by themselves, not interacting with anyone else, is not necessarily captured by the way that laws were written a few years ago. And so you can see people trying to retrofit existing regulations to cover this. But then we're just playing catch up constantly. And so that's why I think we really need to have this change in perspective to think about these things from the get-go. And having really well-developed international standards to guide the processes is where I think DTSP comes in with our ISO 25389 standard as a way of organizing your efforts to anticipate and address harms, and do that in a way that can support regulation, but also doesn't can get ahead of the curve, so that we're not always trying to sort of deal with yesterday's problem.
Absolutely, because playing catch up is what's happening with regulation and law, and technology is just outpacing all of this. The other question that also arises is how do you incentivize safety in product design, et cetera, especially because these are ultimately, at the end of the day, profit-making companies. And this does require a resource, and this is essentially product design, which they want to have a competitive edge over others. But if there's standardization, how do you do that?
Yeah, so I think that there's two ways of coming at this. And the first, and perhaps the most important to my mind, is that um, we need to think about trust and safety as the necessary conditions to enable products that people want to use. And so seeing this as something that can actually generate growth, drive revenue, is not just a cost center for companies. Trust and safety oftentimes is like thought of as, oh, that's, like customer service. It's, things we have to do. And instead, it's actually, if you are building products with these values and these practices in mind, you're going to give people a better experience. More people are going to use the product, and the company is going to thrive. So I think there needs to be that change in mentality. But then also, you have to have, along with that, both the right set of incentives and regulations to ensure that you catch folks who are not leading on these matters. And also, there's all the business partners, I think, that also play a key role in the ecosystem as well. When you think about whether it is advertisers for those types of products that have advertising as kind of part of their business model, if it is payment processors who play a key role when it comes to a lot of online transactions, marketplaces, insurance to help companies prepare for these new kinds of risks. So I think there are a lot of different stakeholders that can all sort of help to make the business case for trust and safety, not strictly as a matter of compliance, but also as a matter of compliance these days as the number of online safety regulations multiply around the world.
But would it be correct to state that this is also an attempt for a culture, a shared culture and values that you want to develop, and is shared by an ecosystem that is interdependent on one another, whether it's the users or the investors or companies who actually roll out these products, to come to a shared understanding of what might be mutually good for everyone?
I think that's exactly right. And I think it is incumbent upon the companies to share more. And I think for too long, perhaps, a lot of this work was happening a little bit behind the scenes, that the teams working on this inside companies were not necessarily the ones who were out there speaking to governments and the public and to NGOs about this work. And more should have been shared sooner. But I think that that ecosystem approach and recognizing that even if people have very different views, especially about what types of content and behavior are, you know, should be allowed, that you can still have, I think, very productive conversations about what practices you use to address those risks.
David, as we round off the conversation, at what level should social responsibility be prioritized? Because we are seeing that there is a significant disruptive impact also of technology, and sometimes some of the harms are irreversible. And this is also in terms of the fabric of society. And then on the other hand, we're seeing, people are talking about tech oligarchies, and there's the rise of authoritarianism. There's everything sort of coalescing. And technologies are at the center of it all.
That is very true. It's a challenging environment out there right now. It's a challenging environment for dealing with these contentious issues in a world that is geopolitically quite challenging. I think that ultimately things like international human rights law, I think, provide a way of apportioning responsibility for these things, whether it's the state responsibility to protect human rights or the corporate responsibility to respect human rights. So I think there are tried and true methods that are not dependent upon new types of technology, and things like international standards as one component of this is one way of helping to identify who is responsible for what they should be doing, and how they can justify and defend their practices and explain them. So that's just one piece of a very complex puzzle that, of course, is made all the more complicated in this space because what we are ultimately talking about is human expression. Human expression and behavior, which is a very challenging, societal issue, to which you are right. Technology has an important role to play, but it doesn't have the only role to play. I'm hoping that through the evolution of these kinds of standards, we can have better informed discussions that can enable more productive approaches, whether it's in how companies operate on their own and how they interact with governments, civil society, and other experts. So that's how we're thinking about it.
And as we close off, any final comments, anything that especially you would like our audience to know or keep up with in terms of what is happening in this sector, what the conversation is about, and how it's relevant to them?
Well, I would encourage folks. Many international standards are quite costly. You have to pay in order to access copies of them. Because DTSP has made our standard, the SAFE framework, available for free on our website. The International Organization for Standardization, ISO, has also made the standard available for free. So I would encourage people to go and take a look at that, ISO IEC 25389. You can use that whether you are an advocate looking to engage with a company about their practices, whether you are someone in government thinking about laws and regulations. I hope that that document helps provide for a better conversation. And we look forward to feedback on it because we are going to be evolving and reviewing that document as it goes forward in order to maintain it as a standard. And so we welcome any and all feedback to help improve that document as it goes forward.
Thank you, David, for making time for DawnNews English. This is all that we have on the DigiPod today.
Thank you so much.